I started out that 3-day weekend just wanting to relax from a hell of a week at work. I always loved camping alone. It's quiet with no one to bother you. Watching the campfire is very relaxing, and yes, I always wanted to see a UFO or Bigfoot. I never had the pleasure of seeing one, well, until this weekend. That weekend I was given top secret information accidentally. I just happened to see something I wasn't supposed to. I have always been nosy when it comes to mysterious things, and this one got me put into detention for the rest of my life on planet Mars. Only if I had done things differently, maybe everyone on planet Earth would be free. I mean truly, really free. I am talking about what happened to me, hoping this will get out to someone who isn't completely controlled by the Archons, someone who can make a difference. Well, this is my story. After working 55 hours this week, I decided to take a 3-day weekend and relax. Grabbed my camping gear and drove to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park and found myself a secluded area in Elkmont Campground. I took in some of the sights before I set my tent up. Got my campfire going and made myself some dinner, grilled hot dogs and some canned baked beans. I sat back in my lounge chair staring into the sky, hoping to see an UFO or hear a Bigfoot whooping. Had a few cold beers, and I was sorry to say by 11 o'clock everything was quiet, and decided to get some rest. I got up sometime around 7:30 a.m., Saturday morning. Got my fire going again and made some coffee and heated up last night's dinner for breakfast. After eating my breakfast, loaded my backpack with some protein bars and headed to Little River Trail. About an hour and 15 minutes the trail merged with another trail called Cucumber Gap. Thank God there was a park bench to rest my legs for a while. I sitting there looking into the thick woods, spotted something about 60 to 70 yards into the thick forest, something that looked big and white. Grabbed my backpack and started walking in that direction. As I got closer, I realized I was looking at a set of white stairs that lead to nowhere in the middle of the forest. I couldn't for the life of me figure why these stairs were in the woods. I stood there for about 5 minutes, then I decided to take a closer look. As I got halfway up the steps, I could see a slight distortion at the top. As I got to the very top I could see an opening to another place. It looks like something from the future. Suddenly I felt like some kind of magnetic force pulled me into it. Just for a second, I was between two different worlds, a somewhat vortex, I guess a portal, where I was not in either place. An instant more I found myself on the other side, standing in the same position I was on the other side, except I was looking at the national park and feeling a little dizzy. I was in a room that looks like a future library, didn't see any books. There was these bright colored crystal discs being stored there, and in the other two wings of the room, there was a type of crystal reader with two screens looking at the national park. There was also a chair, at least I think it is a chair. It's much thinner than I am used to. It was then I noticed the screen and the portal were the same, showing me the national park that I just came from. Being curious, I grabbed the first crystal and removed the crystal that was already in the reader, making sure I didn't misplace this one. I believe this disc is the one I need to get back to my home. I then inserted the first one into the reader. The screen began to display and verbally spoke what looked and sounded like ancient language. It must be the text and language from whoever built this beautiful place. I remember being extremely upset that I couldn't understand their text, yelling out loud, when all of a sudden the screen began displaying English as well as speaking English. It must be some sort of translator built in. It read out loud what was displayed on the screen: a time period in Earth's past, sometime in the 3rd century. I believe it was capable of viewing Earth's past, present and maybe its future too. I had noticed the portal changed to that time period on the screen, I guess allowing anyone to enter to that time period. From the first crystal disc it was displaying data about the owners of the Time Library, a race called the Archons. I became very intrigued, listening to the data on the Archons, about how their planet had exploded from misuse of weapons of mass destruction. Their planet, much larger than Earth, but like Earth, was in orbit between Jupiter and Earth with Mars as its moon. When it exploded, It pushed Mars into its own orbit, and what was left of their planet became our asteroid belt that is now in orbit between Mars and Jupiter. A small amount of them made it to Earth and crash-landed in the South Pole, our Antarctica. I believe they were mistaken as the fallen angels. These Archons took their motherships and converted them into huge underground cities, which are being explored by scientists today. The Archons that made it to the moon and over a period of time had built vast underground cities. These aliens, I believe, were the Watchers, also mistaken as the fallen angels. But a solar event about 55,000 years ago, our sun forced the Archons to leave the moon and then crash-landed into Earth in the South African area, leaving the underground cities they had built on the moon abandoned. I kept viewing each disk in order. I found that the Archons are a low vibration being capable of feeding off human beings' negative energy, meaning they had to feed on any of our negative emotions and any type of fear to live. I had thought to myself that this wasn't a good thing for the human race to have around. I am finding bits of very important history about these Archons that I have never heard of, or it was kept out of the history books somehow in order to keep it from the human race. For example, the alien invasion of the Archons and their reptilian counterparts that occurred sometime about 3600 BC in the 3rd century. I kept loading the crystal disk and listening to the Archons' history. I found more and more bits of history that has been hidden from the human race. They are responsible for the Anunnaki, another form the Archons take, reptilian, messing with human DNA and mixing it with their DNA. Their counterpart, the reptilians, did this only to make a worker race of humans that could mine gold for them. The human race not only were smart enough to mine their gold, but we were able to learn and increase our knowledge as time went on. We also began to increase in numbers and began to want to be like the Archons, because we outnumbered them, and those humans knew the Archon's secret. They went underground, only to buy time. They stayed underground long enough for the human race to forget the Archons and their power over us. Another crystal disk informed me in the 18th century the Illuminati were formed, and over the years it has become the top secret society, over all the others. Most of the members are the bloodline of the Archons, the elites. Another part of history that the human race was not allowed knowing. One of the crystals showed me that Nikola Tesla was murdered, due to some top secret experiments he was working on. He was found dressed in his bed and his safe was broken into and many of his papers were missing. Tesla's newest invention of what was called the death ray, a tower that he had built that was the ultimate war machine that could be used to take down hundreds if not thousands of enemies by using electricity. This was something the elites had to have, and no one else was allowed to possess this kind of power. This again is more elite secret information that was kept from the human race. Another crystal showed me the truth behind the Roswell crash, where the elites hijacked the aliens. Only one survived and kept in a top secret facility, and their spacecraft to reverse engineer it and discover how it works. Soon in 1948 and 1949 there was another UFO crash, and that technology was also hijacked by these so-called elites, and all of the technology discovered from reverse engineering it was kept secret from us again. From the discovered technology from these alien spacecrafts the secret space program was born. Reading another crystal I found that anti-gravity was perfected in 1954, and from that the secret space program started building their own triangle-shaped anti-gravity spacecraft TR series, that was patented by the US Navy this year, another big secret kept from the human race. They landed on the moon and found a base on the surface of the moon built by the Nazis in the late 30s, an evil dictator the Archons in reptilian form helped. The crystal doesn't explain very well, but I believe they added onto that and made it a lot larger. At that time they found very large old ruins underground left behind by the Watchers. They were also responsible for keeping secret the existence of alien life forms from our solar system as well as other galaxies. One of the crystals showed me that a large amount of extraterrestrials have lived inside our planet for thousands of years. But out of all the history that I had seen that day, the most disturbing is the invasion of the Archons. Since the discovery of the Nag Hammadi writings found in Egypt in 1945 that was written sometime in the 3rd century, contains a lot of information that was left out of our Bible 500 years ago, Book of Enoch. These texts have a lot of information on the Archons and what they are and just how bad these beings can be. Most of the text has been suppressed by the powers at bay, meaning they were buried in a cave on purpose to keep hidden from the human race. They have the power to influence human beings in a negative way, influence us to take the wrong path, so we stay unhappy. I have found out they run the Illuminati. Again, these human beings that are in control of the Illuminati are of the 13 royal families that are the Archons bloodline, the secret society which controls all the richest bankers as well CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world. They are working to take control of our planet, one piece at a time. They have been working toward world domination since the 18th century. Also, I have been shown by the Archon History Library one of the biggest Archon influences pushed on the human race is the false religions that have been developed over the years of religion's existence. These religions will only teach the word of the false god that the Archons has fooled the human race into believing he is the real god. His real name is Nimrod, one of the giants, the offspring of Noah's family tree from one of Noah's wives that had the DNA of the giants, bloodline of the Archons. He reigned 500 years over the Nabateans. Later, Masyudi lists Nimrod as the first king of Babylon, and states that he dug great canals and reigned 60 years. There is a statue of Nimrod in the Vatican, but because it looks so much like Jesus, no one protests. The Archons were counting on the human race would go to war over the many false religions, men killing themselves over a lie, that 90% of the wars we have fought were over religion, and we are still fighting wars over religion today, Muslim terrorists versus the Christians, and so on. In Genesis in the Old Testament, it describes the creation of the false perception of our world today, not the way our real God intended us to see. The Archon can influence the way we look at our world. It's the same world, but we all are seeing a negative version of it. When the evil Archons are gone, it will look a whole lot different to the human race. I remember that God of the Old Testament was an evil and mean God, not like the God that Jesus talked about in the New Testament. That world has been hijacked and kept away from the human race. Human beings today in this time have never seen the world the way our real God meant it to look. Anyone that wants to be close to our real God, all you need to do is to have a one-on-one spiritual talk with our God and always keep him close to your heart. The Archons want you to believe we need churches and the men of the cloth to do that. There is no need for a pope, priests, pastors, and any other false prophet that the Archons say we need to talk to our God. Pope Francis is a false prophet and only speaks of the false perception of the false god. His god is Satan, Nimrod. The false god is nothing more than the bloodline of an Archons, his father being an alien that is so arrogant, they destroyed their own planet by the use of weapons of mass destruction. They are completely to blame for the deep state covert government operating in the United States. They are responsible for hate the Democrats are displaying to President Trump and the American people who do not believe in their world. Some of the politicians are followers of some higher human half-breed Archon that influences the rest of the Democrat brainwash politicians in our government. This is just to turn American citizens against one another. Everything they do is to turn us against each other. I have seen so much unexplainable things happening in Washington that is off the wall crazy. Only one can assume the Democratic Party is under total control. Like the 2020 election seems like to me there will be no other candidate to choose, only our current president, and that scares me and it should scare you. Rothschilds are related to the Archons and Donald Trump's bankruptcy was completely wiped off the books by the Rothschilds. Donald Trump's uncle, he was a renowned scientist, was involved with FBI that had taken Nikola Tesla life's work, namely the death ray. Not too long ago, one of the space shuttle's missions saw what looked like the death ray is used on an alien spacecraft, which means someone built it and is using it today. The Archons need that fear in order to survive, which means they need us to keep hating each other, keep fighting each other and keep killing each other. If you take a good look at what's happening in the world today, the Archons along with the Rothschilds have done a great job doing so. It is my opinion these Archons and their human bloodline helpers are alien parasites that feed off of our negative energy, negative emotions and our fear. And let's not forget the evil counterparts, the reptilians. These creatures are also low vibration beings that feed off negative energy, but they love to eat human flesh also. A reptilian not too long ago was spotted by some hikers in a national park out west eating a human head. As long as they have us under their control, doing what they want us to do, we are nothing more than their slaves until we realize the power they have over us and reject their influence. They would die and be gone from us. The next crystal was a peek at the Earth's future. I almost couldn't bring myself to take a look, but I did and saw our nation fate, the biggest outcome of all this hate, fear, torture and killing. If this continues and this is what they want and are counting on, in order to bring on world domination, or a new world order. The president will impose a national Sunday law, which will create civil unrest. Americans will use physical force while protesting. The president will then impose martial law and start using his national red flag gun law that will kill the Second Amendment. The deep state troops will take our weapons from us, and kill our citizens that fight back and imprison the rest of the American citizens. This is to wipe out a big percent of America population, leaving the others in a Walmart FEMA camp. Once this has happened to America, the rest of the world will start falling, one by one. I said to myself, it is time to expose the covert controllers of mankind. I assure you what I found is not speculation, a hoax, or simply the figment of people's imagination. These parasitic creatures are real and they need to be dealt with immediately so mankind can evolve to the next level of existence. I sat back thinking what I could do to stop this from happening, and is it too late to stop the end result? I sat there for almost an hour just staring at the time portal, wondering how could possibly have a chance to stop this nightmare that all of planet Earth will experience sometime in the future. I wish I was able to bring back to my time the massive evidence stored here in the space library, expose the Archons so everyone will begin to reject their influence over us. But there is no crystal reader in my time and it is impossible for me to carry those crystal discs by myself. It was then I realized I haven't explored the rest of the, what I call the time library. Behind the crystal reader was a door that led to a long hallway. I began to walk down into this vast hallway where I found various rooms, 2 small rooms with I guess were beds, and also a very much needed bathroom. Well, at least I think it is. I continued and found at the end of the hallway was something like an elevator. There was a floor below and floor above me. I decided to explore the floor below. When I was lowered into at level, I discovered what looked like an exit door. Also a massive engine room with some type of atomic reactor with huge engines. I believe I may be looking at an anti-gravity device allowing this, whatever it is, to defy gravity. I think this may be an alien spacecraft that could very well be saucer-shaped. I got back into the elevator and went to the top level where I found what I believe was the control room where the spacecraft is piloted from. I found all the controls were labeled in the Archon ancient language that I had no idea how to read. Taking a good look around, I saw several crystal discs behind the controls. One of these discs may show me how to fly this spacecraft. There is a discs reader in the center of the control panel and small screen too, just like the one in the lower deck. I inserted the first disc again. It displayed the control console in English, but even in English, I didn't understand what each control did. But I did see a control labeled, 3-dimensional simulated autopilot. I started looking for that control on the panel. I found it and pressed the control button. Right after, a 3-dimensional transparent being appeared sitting in one of the pilot's chairs. I guess this is what the Archons look like, ugly as hell. It looked right at me and then spoke English. It asked me, "What is your desired destination?" I was looking at it with amazement. I told it quickly, Washington, D.C. at the White House lawn. It looked back at me and asked me what planet and what time period, and I told him planet Earth in the year 2019, in December 13th, Friday, and I don't care what time. I sat down in the other seat at the controls, and what happened next was out of this world. The autopilot turns on the power and all the controls light up, along with the walls that were now a red glow. It was then the autopilot went through some sort of pre-flight checklist. After 2 to 3 minutes he applied power to the engines and the ship began to shake badly. I think he applied little more power and the ship started to break free. Slowly the spacecraft was lifting into space. It was then I realized the whole ship had been buried underground in our Earth's moon. Once we had cleared the surface of the moon, I could see right through the transparent walls and I was staring at the Earth and stars. Just then a large portal opened up in front of us and the autopilot flew into it, and at a blink of an eye we were somewhere over Virginia in Shenandoah National Park. The autopilot manually took us right to the White House lawn and slowly landed the spacecraft. The auto then looked at me and said, "All of the White House defenses were neutralized by the spacecraft." I went to thank him, when the three-dimensional autopilot just disappeared into thin air, and I ran to the elevator and went to the lower deck where I found that exit door and opened it. I was met on the White House lawn by the Secret Service and arrested and taken into federal custody. The alien spacecraft was seized by the Army Special Forces and they placed it under guard until the government scientist could take a look inside it. They also built some kind of wall, so the spacecraft was hidden completely from the public. I was taken from the White House lawn into the White House and was brought somewhere underground. That's where the Secret Service officers started interrogating me. The president was listening in on the interrogation on the other side of the one-way mirror. For 1 hour I told my story on how I got on the craft and about the Archons library and that I listened to all the crystals. It was then I told them about Archons and what they are doing to the human race. I then told them what my intentions were. No one said a thing, just sat there stared at me. Soon after I was taken to the Pentagon through a back entrance. We entered an elevator that went down very deep, maybe like 20 floors down. From there I had been taken to another interrogation room. I was told to sit down and be quiet. It was then I looked up and saw the secret space logo on the wall in front of me. It was then I realized I had landed right in the hands of the Archon brainwashed human followers. I had no idea that Washington was that far gone. I had no idea the Archons had that much influence over Washington, D.C. I wasn't sure if the president is one of them or not. I did hear the Secret Service officer say, "Get him out of here before the president decides to question him also." My idea was to land the spacecraft on the White House lawn and was supposed to be a victory over the evil Archons. I wanted to liberate the human race from these assholes. Now this story will never be seen and maybe the landing the spacecraft will only get shown on some small newspaper, maybe on a cover of some magazines, but no big news report will be televised, meaning the human race will still be in the dark about what the Archons and what they are doing to Americans and the rest of the human race. A little while later I was taken deeper under the Pentagon to an underground high-speed train. From there the train at a very high speed took me out west in another deep underground military base and we took an elevator up into some sort of alien base. I was told I was waiting for a military space transport where I was to be transported to Mars and made a slave for the remainder of my life. I started laughing out loud after I realized I will end up just being another missing 411 victim. Then I got really mad. I know not one of my family members, or my friends will never see and hear from me again. Think about it, gone without a trace of evidence, like I just disappeared from the face of the earth. When the space transport craft arrived, one of the military black op officers grabbed my arms and hands and shoved them together. One of the big guards pushed me towards the craft. I almost fell on my ass. It was then I got so mad. I started screaming out aloud, "We are human beings. We are not fighting your bloody wars anymore. We will always fight for our freedom, because we know what freedom feels like, and this is not it. We've been given the illusion of freedom, illusion of a choice. That's the genius of this. These rulers have created this false society. They has conditioned us to deny what is right in front of our eyes, which is why we are their slaves. We must all fight for our freedom or we will lose what is so dear to us, our freedom, our home planet Earth."